Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, on November 18th of 1923, a young couple living in Indianapolis, Indiana, George and Gertrude Stevens, welcomed their third child to the world, and they named him Theodore Fulton Stevens, Ted for short. And like all new parents, I'm sure that George and Gertrude were filled with hope and optimism about their boy's future, the things that he would do, the places that he would go, the life that he would have. But I suspect that even they didn't realize what an extraordinary life he would lead, a life of service and accomplishment, during which he earned his place as a giant in the history of this chamber and certainly in my state of Alaska. So we're looking forward to the 100th anniversary, the birth of the late Senator Ted Stevens. This is coming up on Saturday. So I've come to the floor this afternoon to make sure that all those of us who serve here, all who are listening, know why it's important that we continue to remember and celebrate this truly great man. Ted's service to our country began during World War II when he enlisted in the Army Air Corps as a pilot. He supported General Chennault's Flying Tigers in the China-Burma-India theater, flying missions over the hump many, many times behind enemy lines. After the war, Ted Stevens completed law school. He moved north to the future, to Alaska, where he served as a U.S. attorney in Fairbanks. It was just a few years later, during the Eisenhower administration, that he joined the Department of Interior, where he served as Secretary Fred Seaton's right-hand man in the successful fight for Alaska statehood. Then after statehood, Ted was elected to the Alaska House of Representatives. That was 1964. He was then appointed to the U.S. Senate in 1968. He would go on to win re-election to the Senate 7 straight times, receiving almost 80% of the vote back in 2002. In all, he served his state and his country for a total of 40 years and 10 days as a senator. Pretty extraordinary. And Ted was a pretty busy legislator. He chaired 4 different committees, including appropriations. His colleagues chose him to be their minority whip, the majority whip, and the assistant Republican leader. He led the Senate's Arms Control Observer Group, the U.S.-China Interparliamentary Group. He also spent several years as our president pro tem. Ted was by all accounts a very powerful legislator, but he used his purpose, his power. He used his power for a single purpose, and that was to help his country and to help his state. For him, it was pretty basic. He helped us settle Aboriginal land claims and create Alaska Native corporations. He secured the authorization to build the Trans-Alaska Pipeline System, which remains to this day our state's economic backbone and provides for our energy security. Ted was an outdoors guy. He loved fishing. He was able to write the framework that continues today to guide federal fisheries management. That's the Magnuson-Stevens Act. He was a champion for national defense, as well as international competitiveness. And he truly helped America become a superpower, and I believe the economic envy of the world. He helped to fund breast cancer research. He promoted women's participation in sports through Title IX. Incredible what he did for women's athletics and sports. He also, very proudly and unabashedly, sometimes maybe even gleefully, brought home what I imagined to be billions of dollars. We're calling those now congressionally directed spending. Used to be earmarks back in the day. But they were specific, targeted to build basic infrastructure and to meet community needs across our still young and undeveloped state. We have terminology in the Senate for those who have been around for a while, who observe the traditions and the history of the Senate, but Ted was really an old bull in the Senate parlance. He was a statesman, he was a patriot, he was a force to be reckoned with. He was known to have just a little bit of a temper, although I found that oftentimes that temper was just used for effect. He would don an incredible Hulk tie, just to show you all that he really meant business. And on those days, when you saw him on the floor and he was wearing the tie, you know maybe it was best to stay out of his way that day, or certainly to be with him when he was fighting for Alaska's interests. But as much as he was a fighter in that way, he was also one who worked across party lines. He legislated in the good old-fashioned way. He had a relationship with Senator Dan Inouye from Hawaii, often referred to him as his brother, and they led as a model that duo of Alaska and Hawaii. They would rotate, literally rotate, on appropriations, being the senior appropriators. One Congress, one would be the chairman, the next Congress, majorities come and go, and there would be no daylight between the two of them. It was an extraordinary relationship built on respect and an understanding that you stand up and you fight for your state's needs. Ted was one of those who really tried to let the politics stand down and just focus on what was good. He had a saying, and it's certainly one that has been emblazoned on many things that I have seen in these past couple decades, but he would say, "To hell with politics, just do what's right for Alaska." And those are words that many of us still follow, and that I think those in the state, in the Senate here, would do well to live by. Do what's right for the people that have sent you here. Do what's right for your state. I am so immensely fortunate to have worked with Ted. I was actually a high school intern for Ted Stevens when I graduated from high school, and then to have the privilege to serve alongside him, have him as a mentor, a friend, a partner over the course of so many decades. I have said and have been quoted in different articles about the role that Ted played in Alaska's history, and have said there's nothing that has happened in my lifetime, there is nothing that has happened since statehood that Ted Stevens did not touch, that he did not build, did not create. He had that much influence. There really was no one like him. He had a vision, and he was determined to achieve it no matter who or what stood in the way. He won medals for his distinguished military service. He was chosen as Alaskan of the Century. The entire 20th century, we designated that honor, that respect for him, for his remarkable service at statehood and in the Senate. Now, it is true that a federal investigation and extreme prosecutorial misconduct tipped an election that prematurely ended Ted's time in public office. That type of debasement would cost many their faith in the institutions that they had served for so long, but not with Ted. Not with Ted. He kept his faith in the institution, not only in the institution of the Senate, but the institution of the judiciary. He knew he was innocent and maintained that, and was ultimately exonerated. But he left a reminder with all of us when he gave his departure speech in 2008. He left the Senate saying that my future is in God's hands. Alaska's future is in yours. We actually have had buttons made up with Ted's smiling face. I believe it is exactly this picture. and it says, "Alaska's future is in your hands." And believe me, I look at that every single day. I take it very seriously. We tragically lost Ted in a plane crash just 2 years later after he left office. This was August of 2010. It's still really hard for me to believe that he's been gone for 13 years, but in so many ways, he's still with us. He's still around. I see it in my office. I have the same office in the Hart Building that he had. The same totem pole that he had in his office is now in my office. I visit his portrait here in the Capitol, right outside that door there. Visit his grave in Arlington National Cemetery. At the Ted Stevens International Airport, which I'm flying in and out of just about every week, it seems, there's a statue that sits in kind of a main open area, and it's a life-size with Ted sitting there with a briefcase at his feet and just kind of talking extemporaneously. And I walk by and give that hand a little squeeze every time I leave to go somewhere. So I certainly continue to pay my respects, but I often think about how Ted would face the issues that we confront today. Not only the issues, but how we are confronting them as legislators and lawmakers. I mentioned Ted's legendary temper, and understand that we all have different ways that we can respond and react. But in fairness, I think that Ted would be very, very discouraged by what he is seeing with the politicization, the disrespect, I think, sometimes that we see with whether it's name-calling or just not treating one another with a level of decorum that the office demands. As I say, he was an institutionalist. He believed in this institution as I do. And I think he recognized that if we don't show respect for others, for one another, how can we expect that that respect will be reciprocated from others who are observing us? Ted sometimes referenced the pace of forgetting. It was his recognition that times change, people come and go. How things happened or why they mattered isn't always recorded. Only 26 out of the 100 members of the current Senate, barely over a quarter of this chamber, ever had the privilege of serving alongside him. But while Ted may be gone, he's certainly not forgotten. You don't forget legends like Ted Stevens, not here in the institution that he loved, and certainly not back home in Alaska. We remember Uncle Ted, that's what we still call him, Senator Ted Stevens. We miss him, but as we near his 100th birthday, we will celebrate him, we honor his service, and thank him for his life of dedicated work on our behalf. And just a couple days from now, on Saturday, November 18th, I'd encourage everyone to just stop for just a second, think about the contributions of great leaders like Ted Stevens. Certainly, I'm going to be standing by to wish this great man a happy 100th birthday and to count the blessings that he left behind. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that a really great editorial from the Anchorage Daily News that was published on Sunday, November 12th, about Senator Stevens' centennial birthday be printed in the Congressional Record following my remarks.